Well, what else would it be but Brad Stine has issues? With God's comic Brad Stine, where comedy, conservatism, and Christianity collide in a cacophony of clarity. I am God's comic Brad Stine, and today, one day before one of the most important elections in United States history, we have a very special guest. Not only a special guest, but one you guys who've watched this podcast have seen many times, maybe the biggest, most often guest I've had. Rick Green from Patriot Academy will be with us tonight discussing the ramifications of this election that, as we film this, will be tomorrow, November 5th. This is November 4th. 2024. So I know that this will last in infamy. Whatever you film today in the ethers will stand there. So 10 years from now, you're going, what? That we already know what happened. But today, we don't know what's going to happen. And so Rick is going to stand there. So 10 years from now, you're going, what? That we already know what happened. But today, we don't know what's going to happen. And so Rick is going to talk about that. But more importantly, Wyatt, I can't talk much at all.
I was going to say, do you want to do this again, like maybe next week?
How do you mean?
Look, I'm not, I don't want to sugarcoat it.
Yeah.
You sound like a potato getting peeled, but like you have a mouth and you're screaming doing it.
That was an odd...
I mean, there's just not really any good way to describe whatever sounds are coming out of your mouth.
So are you saying that my voice sounds a little tired?
Well, if we're going with the food theme, I'd say it sounds a little horseradish.
Oh, look at you using your little puns.
I mean, that was a pretty big word. I wouldn't call that little.
Okay, well, listen, it was a big word, and it was it was your attempt to kindly walk your father through the challenges and difficulties of a voice that's a little hoarse.
But Brad, why is your voice hoarse?
Well, the reason it's raspberry is because I just wait a minute. You don't get to bury your head in your
Yes,
hand.
I do. Raspberry, really?
You talked about using food puns, and I jumped in at the last minute to let you know I can play this game as good as you can.
Yes. You proved that you can play the game. I proved you shouldn't have.
Yeah, well, listen, you went with a potato, so I don't know that what you're bragging about.
At least a potato is a one-syllable word. That's easy for the average person to digest.
I do need to stop for a moment and just make sure I can grab potato. Potato at least is a one-syllable word. Yeah, well played.
Isn't it?
Well,
hold on.
potato. Yeah, that's one. Potato. Yep, that's one syllable.
It's not. No,
Potato.
You're purposefully going, like you're stretching it out. It's not 3 syllables, is it? Let me not Google that real quick. Continue, though, on your thing.
Wyatt, please, Lord in heaven, tell me you're not serious, that you can't tell that potato is 3 syllables?
Okay, I was thinking of it in my head, and I kind of rushed it a bit, so it condensed them all into 1 syllable.
That was really, didn't make you look well.
This isn't about me. Talk about your thing or whatever.
Okay, well, anyways, here's what happened, folks. So as we tape this episode today that you are watching right now tonight, and the reason we tape, and if you're brand new to the Brad Stine Has Issues, there's a couple things you need to know. Number one, the voice you're hearing is my son, Wyatt Leroy Stine. He didn't used to exist, but I created him from whole cloth. He exuded from my loins, and from that moment on, Wyatt became a sentient human being. Why do you remember
the thing, audience? He said the joke. Laugh.
Well, look, I just think of the power that a person has who has a child. You created them like they weren't here. You lived your life. You went through all the emotions of history. You saw things. You saw movies. You did your life. You did all these things. This other human doesn't even exist, and suddenly a human exists, and you can talk to them. And then they can read books about the history that you actually lived in, like in the 80s. And I'm like, well, I lived in the 80s. And for you, it's like this ethereal, like transcendent reality of fantasy. I guess it's true, but I've never really was there. It's like Oz, and it's true. And yet I made you. And I think if you think about it like that, in a sacred sort of mystical way, creating from somebody else. We're contingent on God, right? But we create from others, from God. But then we create and recreate others. Is a pretty noble and deep responsibility, Wyatt.
If you think of it like that, then absolutely, yeah. Unfortunately, I don't think of it like that.
Well, you're
the
the
first
one.
thought that I had was, so you existed in this history that I'm reading from in a book.
Yeah.
Why on earth do you not embellish itself to make you look better? Yes, in the 80s, Martians invaded, and I successfully fought them off with a spork. Like, come on. What history book out there was going to disprove that?
So what you're saying is those of us who experience a part of history that the new breed haven't been born yet, we should falsify the history books to make it sound more...
Don't call it falsifying. That sounds nefarious. You're embellishing.
Wait a minute. I want to make sure. Nefarious. Yeah, that's one syllable. Anyways, I want you to understand something, Wyatt.
What have I done?
I did a show last night, and for those of you who watch every Monday, and I used to have my little iPad here, and I try to look at people and say hi to them, and then we found out that my lips didn't match my voice, and because
that was terrifying to see live.
And
I didn't even know how that was possible.
No, it's like a 1963 Japanese Godzilla movie.
Oh yeah, when they dub it horribly.
Yeah, dub it horribly.
Yeah.
But we sit here with my son trying to figure out how to fix all the little issues that we have, and every time we try to make a fix, I usually have to buy something. The fix always has me having to pay for something. It has something to do with Wyatt having to add another button when he hasn't nailed the first two, and then it has to do with us, even leaving our live stream where I could talk to everybody and have to pre-record so that everything looks good, because I started working with Salem Network, big giant network. How about that? But you got to have things in a very specific, because they're a big company, Wyatt. You and I were just a couple little knuckleheads, a couple little guys working out of our garage.
No.
You know what it was like? It was like you were Bill Gates, and I was who's the other guy that figured everything?
Steve Jobs?
Well, I was thinking Steve Jobs, but who was Steve Jobs' Wozniak? He was the guy that actually did all the programming.
I have absolutely no idea who that is.
That should be...
Nobody knows who that is.
Wozniak was the guy that actually did the programming. Jobs had all the ideas, and then he said, now, can anybody do what I just thought of? And Wozniak did it, and he was never given the credit that he deserved. If you see any movies about that experience, he was kind of... Jobs got all the glory because he was such a charismatic guy and a creative guy. He was an Elon Musk-y type guy, but he didn't know how to code and do the stuff that you need a super nerd to do. Why would you consider yourself a nerd, a general nerd, a normal nerd, or are you bordering on super nerd?
Yeah, I'm super nerd, and my power is to have all this knowledge yet still be part of a podcast called Brad Stine Has Issues.
Well, listen, I got some very sad news for those who are regular viewers. And I'm guessing we got right now by this point, Wyatt, you and me would have to agree that Karen Boyd has already stepped in to say something funny with a meme.
Oh, yeah.
I'll bet you that Stan Stinson has jumped in, said hi. Of course, Ashley Haas. I don't know if you remember Ashley Haas, but she was somebody that used to rent go-karts to kids in the neighborhood. Do you remember her?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, the really fast ones that moved like 30 miles an hour.
Oh, she was amazing. Anyways, that was a little side hustle she did when she wasn't creating insulation artwork. So a lot of people that put insulation into their walls, it's just blankets, brown paper, but she would mark on them and make beautiful artistic.
So it just made sealed away to never be seen again.
Yeah, but to her it was more about the thought.
Future archaeologists would to demolish our houses and go, "What is this magnificent Baroque painting that I've seen?"
And some might compare it to the pyramids of Egypt when it comes to longevity, when it comes to intrigue, trying to figure out how did they even do this with the technology.
Man, the people who painted that mural must have been really rich, because if they weren't, that thing is so expensive, they'd wind up Baroque.
Yeah, no, I like that. But you'd already burned Baroque earlier when you mispronounced it first.
Yeah, exactly. So I fixed it.
No.
What's the problem?
It was a little
This
contrived.
is now Brad Stine has fixes.
That was contrived. Why?
It was not contrived. It's one of the most... No, I'm proud of that joke. By the way, be Baroque, one syllable.
Baroque. It sure is. Baroque. But, yeah, just say it fast. Potato. Hey,
it works for potatoes.
I just figured out how to make potato one syllable. Potato.
That's what I did. I didn't do it as intentionally, but that's basically what I did.
Well, I don't want to do that intentionally because my throat. Let's get back.
Right, that was a thing. Why do you keep deviating from the obvious questions?
Well,
this isn't Brad Stine has talk show.
Okay. Let me see if I can land this plane. What happened to my voice? All right. So last night, Sunday night at Zany's, the Lab in Nashville, Tennessee, I recorded 2 shows of my new album that isn't done yet called, and I've already told you guys this, you were the first ones I let you know what the name was going to be called, Laugh While It's Legal. And I finally recorded it last night, 2 shows, but I hadn't worked for about 2 weeks prior to that. And I don't like that because one thing about comedy that if you don't do stand-up comedy, you need to understand is that it's so much about timing. The cadence, the rhythm is what makes it make sense. And the only way you can stay on top of that is to do it as often as you can. And so I didn't get a chance to do 4 or 5 shows in a row and then go film my show. So I would be really in the groove. Most people like Jared Matella, who produced this with me last night, he was also involved with the Joe Rogan taping just a few months ago. And he said that I think Rogan did 2 or 3 sets, a night in his club for like 3 or 4 nights before he taped. So he got used to his rhythm. I didn't get that. So I felt a little off rhythm, especially the first show. The first show was incredible. I mean, the audience was just so hot and lively. It was great. Second show was not as lively, but it was almost like the first show was a dress rehearsal because it allowed me to kind of refine the groove. And then the second show, I was a little bit more fluid. I mean, both shows were fine and great and people were happy, but you can just tell the difference if you compare the 2. But between the 2 of those shows, we will have my 7th album, Laugh While It's Legal. But again, because I hadn't performed for a couple weeks, A, I was not as tight as I would have liked to have been, and B, my throat wasn't kind of warmed up. So anyways, I ended up getting a little hoarse. I don't know if you can tell.
I believe the colloquial term is a pony.
Well, I got a little pony, and
no. Just pony.
Oh,
a little pony is just redundant. It's like calling it a midget dwarf.
Okay, so I don't even know what you're talking about.
Well, if you were at the show at Zadie's at the Lab, you'd know exactly what I'm talking about.
You're telling me that this comic had the audacity to mock ponies on stage?
No, but you did mock dwarves, midgets, and little people.
I don't think mock is the accurate...
depending on who you ask.
Well, that's a good point. Actually, that's a great point because the whole concept. So I'll give you guys a little, what do you call it? A spoiler. I do have a little routine within the mix. It's about over an hour of a show at this point. It'll probably get edited down to an hour. There is a joke that deals with the word midget. Okay. Now it's a spoiler, so you'll see it coming. But the thing is, the point of the joke was I wasn't mocking people who have I don't even know what the technical term. Why can you look up what is the technical term for midget? Like there must be a medical condition for midget, right? I mean, it'd be like,
is it different than dwarfism?
well, being as it's a different word, I'm going to say yes.
Okay, I'll look it up, but if you're wrong, I will tell you.
Well, a dwarf, historically, and I even mentioned it in the show, have a particular shorter than average height, but their limbs and their head is out of proportion. Like their heads are usually a little bigger, their arms are usually a bit more stunted, and so they're out of proportion. Whereas a midget is almost just like a miniature human, just shrunk down. Their arms are in proportion, their head is in proportion. They're just like they look like little kids, but they're adults. So it's a different form of whatever it is that caused this syndrome in them. But anyways, I didn't mock them at all. Matter of fact,
okay, looked at. I looked. I didn't. I remembered. Midget is not actually a medical term.
Right.
Dwarf is. So
Okay.
dwarfism is the closest thing we have to a medical, like, scientific term for it.
They don't differentiate them medically between a dwarf and whatever a midget would be called.
They kind of do. They're all two different definitions.
Okay.
But as far as the medical community is concerned, dwarfism is the only official one.
Okay.
The other, midget is just stunted growth.
Okay.
That's it.
Okay. Well, anyways, I talk about it, but the biggest point of everything I've always tried to do in my comedy, if you guys have watched it, and certainly in this particular show, I'm really dealing with the cultural issues that are happening. I've always tried to not just make a joke about it, but I tried to make a point about it. There was something deeper about this particular behavior or this particular new reality of culture that I want to illuminate, and I want to dissect, and I want to see if there's something nefarious here. I want to see if there's something that is abusive of freedoms and liberties and so forth. This is stuff that means something to me. So you'll see when the show comes out that, yeah, I talk about the word midget, but I also describe how it wasn't in any way done to be derogatory. So that was the point. So know what, you set it up by saying that I was mocking these people.
Depending on who you ask. I made sure to add that part because I know. I saw the show. I know what you're getting at. It's not technically mocking, but that doesn't mean people don't associate it with it.
You're right. And that's one of the things that I pointed out was why, if I'm offended by a word, that counts. But if I deliver the word not meaning offense, that doesn't count. Why is only one perspective given power and not another? Why is the intent not given the same amount of respect as the reception? And there's only one reason, because somebody wants power over you, because they don't allow you the same access to freedom and agency, and presuming the best of you, they don't. They presume the worst. You're exactly right. Whoever listens to this, depending on their philosophy, base philosophy, and certainly if they are leftists and progressives, will be offended because their entire philosophy is based on offense. That's how they take control. They are manipulating the virtues of people who are trying to be kind and moral and polite, and they manipulate that to make you shut up and self-censor so that they can lord over you their perspective, and you not wanting to be called a name and accept that as reality when it's not, self-censor, thus self-enslave yourself to their perspective, and thus you give away your liberty to them, give them power over you, and act as though you've done something virtuous. They, by the way, are saying the same thing. We're virtuous by making sure that you no longer treat people like this, and you didn't do anything at all. It's just a false manipulation to be able to control you. And that's what this joke was about. And had you not brought it up, Wyatt, we wouldn't have had to spend the last 5 minutes me articulating about it.
Look, man, we're on a tight schedule, and we kind of needed to fill some time.
Well, you're right. And Matt, speaking of time, I got a special guest tonight, Rick Green, and I tell you, he's somebody that you're going to want to hear, you're going to want to listen to, you're going to want to watch this, because with this election tomorrow, you know, it's just us talking about what it could mean, who's going to win, what will it mean one way or the other, what does it mean to be an American, what does it mean to be free. But I also have a clip that I did a while ago, one of my original Brad Stine Has Issues before we created a podcast, and it's about voting. I thought, you know what, I'm going to recycle that. I'm going to put it out onto this podcast just so you can think about it, maybe share it with others who might go to vote tomorrow. But then I do want to say this before we go to the clip, but I do have one special surprise for you when we come back from this clip that you are going to want to stick around and see. I promise you, it probably will be a bit of a surprise, but a fun one is my hope, and certainly one you wouldn't expect. But hey, we need some good laughs, we need some good fun, we need some good hope and optimism in such dire times in America. So watch this clip about how to vote, get some inspiration from it, talk amongst yourself. And when you come back, before we go to Rick Green, we will have a special surprise. In the meantime, watch this clip about how you, as a Christian, should vote. Hey, it's God's Comic Brad Stine, and here's my question to you. How do you decide who to vote for in presidential elections? Secondly, why don't you just choose the person I do? Make it a lot easier on all of us. Skeptical? Ooh, come on in. All right, many of you may not have heard about this, but we have a very important presidential election coming up shortly. And so, I don't know, I thought I'd spend a moment examining what criteria should be considered when voting for the person that will become the most powerful leader on earth. First thing you always need to remember is that we are a constitutional republic. Republic means rule of the people. So if you're human, you fall in the category of the people. So the first criteria you should examine would be, does the person you're going to vote for represent your point of view? Remember, because we vote for people to carry our voice to Congress and the Senate, we should be very sober in considering that how they defend and implement certain concerns, laws, and traditions of our country, you are approving of. They are your representative. And so when you see your candidate make a speech or buy a bagel or kiss a baby, that's you. So number one, do they represent your concerns and desires for the functioning of this great nation? Number two, are they strict adherents to the Constitution? Remember that even though they represent your voice and desires, they are bound by the rule book the founders put in place. So we would know what we are allowed to do and what we aren't allowed to do in order to remain as consistent and fair in regards to maintaining order and defending the freedoms and liberties of the entire country as possible. Third, every president could possibly be nominating another Supreme Court judge. Now, this is incredibly important because of the three branches of government instituted by the Constitution to separate powers and remain a check and a balance on each other. None of these has done more damage, has made more blunders, has used their position to inculcate their personal point of view over the original intent of the Constitution than the judiciary. The founders believed that the judicial branch was actually the weakest of the three because all they were expected to do was not make laws, not redefine laws, not edit the Constitution or read into it ideas and concepts that were never there, but were only there to make sure that the law-making branch, which is the Congress, simply made no laws that breached the Constitution. Oh, and are you ready? The original intent of the Constitution. See, if you think I'm being over dramatic, just keep in mind that everyone who reads the Constitution sees clearly that, for example, all human beings are equal and deserve to be free based on the dignity given them by their Creator, which is apparently how the Supreme Court in 1857 in the Dred Scott decision reached the conclusion that slavery was okay. Also keep in mind that for 150 years, the freedom a state or even the federal government had in using taxpayer dollars to secular and religious institution was considered fair and balanced. Even Jefferson signed treaties to send Christian ministers to Native Americans. Yet suddenly, in 1947, the Supreme Court found that treating religious schools equally in regards to funding for bus vouchers for sending students to religious schools, which, by the way, allowed the freedom for all Americans, secular and religious, to equally share in where their taxes were distributed, was suddenly unconstitutional. Up until then, it wasn't. What happened? The Supreme Court decided to find a law that was never there before, to institute a new version of the Constitution so their secular point of view could be established. Fair? Of course not. But that's why getting Supreme Court justices that are originalists, that is, interpret laws through the prism of the original intent of the Constitution, is the only way we can maintain consistency and allow the most amount of freedom for the most amount of Americans, even the ones you hate. We need a woman president. We need a gay president. Never mentioned is their competence or their experience. Please keep in mind that the single most important right in the Constitution is the first line, the freedom of religion. Now, you might think, oh, I'm prejudiced because I'm a Christian, but you would be in error. The reason it is the most important is because it represents the freedom of conscience. It deserves the most protection because it allows the secular and atheist and religious the most fair and equal treatment under the law. By the way, I hope you've noticed the criteria I am exploring here in regards to what is most important in a president. Notice, I haven't told you who to vote for or anything about the candidate other than the only thing that should matter, their philosophy in regards to America, our Constitution, and the good of the people. But let me tell you what should be considered irrelevant in your choice. What we don't need is the first woman president. We don't need the first gay president or the first black woman or Hispanic or the first transgendered president. You see, to categorize candidates based on a physical trait or a gender trait or a behavioral trait has absolutely nothing to do with the most important feature necessary for a great leader: competency. Keep in mind that one of the many reasons leftism is so damaging to society is because it values group distinctions over proven experience and philosophical acumen. Remember, it is the left that instituted the idea that we need to lower the bar for college admissions in order to help out minorities that might be excluded because they aren't doing as well in testing. Can you possibly be more condescending, racist, and arrogant as to belittle others based on race by claiming how sensitive and protective you are of other races than your own? So let me leave you with this. If you truly care about freedom in America, fairness, jobs, defense, liberty, and civility, then you're going to have to vote for the person that not only champions those ideals, but has a track record of actually implementing them when they were in a position to do so. America is on the brink of potentially imploding forever. This experiment isn't over yet, and it is volatile. Vote your conscience, folks, but do us all a favor. Pray that we are able to continue as a nation that sees each other in all our variables as Americans. If you don't love the country that has given you this privilege, you are the problem. This is God's comic, Brad Stine, and clearly PC free is liberty. Now, Now, I know most of you just watched this episode are thinking, can we vote for you for president? No, you can't. But you know what you can do? You can vote for me by going to Brad Stine Has Issues on YouTube and subscribe to it and challenge all your friends to do the same. Go to my Facebook fan page and like and follow. Now, why do we tell you to do that? Because it builds up our numbers and it shows advertisers and so forth that people want this content. And that's the only way I can keep this going. You know, I mean, somebody's got to pay for this stuff. So that's the best I could do. But what's interesting is that was recorded a few years ago. I think it was recorded during the 2020. So it must have been the Biden Trump moment where people were trying to decide, you know, who to vote for and so forth. So, but it's all precedent. It always works. It always is the same ramifications for what happens when who wins and who takes control and who has power. And so here we sit, you know, trying to figure out what life's going to be like in America. No matter who wins, it's going to have ramifications. It's going to be friction and difficulty. So I don't know. I really don't know, other than if God doesn't intervene, we're in bad shape. But in the meantime, again, sorry about the voice, but I told you guys I had a very special surprise. I don't know if you guys, if you've been watching Brad Stine Issues for a while, but I've had a handful of fans over the years that just have always shown up every Monday for whatever reason, and they've been very generous. Donations as well as just time and prayer, and they just believe in what I'm doing. I'm very grateful. It's very humbling. And some of them have come out and seen shows before, and we've shown pictures. And but one of them actually circumvented the sacred domain of the studio, and that was Ashley Haas. She ended up at the studio, and I brought her on because I thought, you know, we got to let people see, you know, what they look like, because you guys are used to talking to each other on the thread. But there was one person that I was very pleased and excited to see in my show last night when I recorded it, because this person made the trek from their home state to mine to watch the show. And not only is it, again, a humbling thing when somebody will do that, but in your case, those of you watching this tonight, you might have noticed that there's somebody that you're used to seeing on the threads that's always interacting and always being part of it. And I guess theoretically they could do it again tonight, because they can just go on and watch the show like they normally do. But what's different is they'll have a different angle and a different perspective this time, because they won't be doing it from the sanctity of their own home, but instead the sanctity of this fortress of solitude, because I have a special guest here who made the 12-hour trek. You know him as Saint Nick, but he's really known throughout the earth as Nick Kress. Folks, Saint Nick has made it. Nick, what in the world caused you to get on a truck and drive 12 hours and instead of at least taking a bus, something?
Well, it's always fun to find a reason to escape the day-to-day hustle and bustle. And, you know, I like to go bike riding, and since it is now snowing in Minnesota.
Is it?
Yeah,
okay.
It was snowing the day I left.
Okay.
So throw the bike in the back of the truck, come down to Tennessee, and go biking.
Well, it's been exceptionally warm here in November, so it must have been some nice rides. How is it pretty?
Oh, yeah. Some of those hills you have are fantastic. They go straight up and straight down.
Yeah. What kind of bike do you ride?
Actually, it's nothing special. It's a 22-year-old Giant. Just a 21-speed bike.
And you've been riding all your life?
You know, I probably put more miles on it in the last 5 years than I have in the 20.
Yeah, and you do it for fun, for exercise?
Yeah, fun and exercise, you know, trying to get a little bit better back in shape and whatnot. And
well, you know, like I said to you before, last night, I said thanks for coming out. But, you know, you showed up at a show in Minnesota a few years ago. Yep. That's when you first, you were the first person that I ever introduced to Wyatt to face-to-face. I think I said, man, if you're willing to come out here and see these shows, I'm gonna call Wyatt up and We did a FaceTime call. Of course, he was there last night, and I guess did you recognize him, or how did you even remember what he looked like?
Well, actually, that was kind of the funny thing is I was talking to the guys in front of me, and I'm like, yeah, I saw Brad at 2 different shows, and one of them he calls up Wyatt, and I get to see who Wyatt is, and here he comes walking up to the table. I'm like,
Okay.
here he is.
Oh, so Wyatt was at that show. Okay,
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Well, you video called him, but last night, as I was telling the story, Wyatt walks up to the table.
Oh, but
So-
you remembered it was him, though.
I was like, yeah, that's Wyatt.
Okay,
Yeah,
all right.
It's kind of hard to miss who Wyatt is once you know what he looks like.
That's true. Well, and I think for those who are, we turned it into this little funny thing where nobody ever gets to see him, right? And it was mainly because we just had one camera at the time.
Yeah.
We had no other way to do it. But we just made it into a little funny joke, and I think it's been fun. When we interviewed the ghost that time, and he was under the sheet, and the time his arm shows up or whatever. So, but we have come to the conclusion, and maybe this will be maybe I mentioned this before, but we're thinking about at the 100th episode, maybe it's time to reveal why it's only because if this continues to grow, and one of the things we considered was doing some live podcasts where people can come and watch it happen, like a crowd. Well, they're going to see him. So eventually it's like, I guess we're going to have to kind of move to a new season where he gets, everybody, I guess, like our interaction. But, maybe to have a face with the voice might actually enhance it. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, yeah, I think it would be good to see Wyatt here, but if you wanted to do it slowly, you could do the old Wilson gag where there's kind of a little
just
fence,
get a piece of
fence up in front of his face.
Yeah,
here.
so just piecemeal him, like just a piece at a time. Well, let me ask you a question. So, just a quick background on you. So, you started watching my original Facebook Lives, I guess, during Corona, when I came on.
Yeah, I kind of started listening to you back in my high school days, early 2000s, whatnot, and, things got busy, getting out of college and whatnot, and didn't know you were around really much, and then all of a sudden, I found it on Facebook, so like it, and then all of a sudden I see your live, so pop up, and just became a habit.
Yeah, well, and it's been crazy that guys like you have kind of shown up virtually unimpeded for 3 years or more on Monday nights. It's like there's got to be times when you're like, oh, I got something going or whatever.
Well, I have checked in while I was working on a walk-in cooler one night.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm out on a late night service call.
Yeah. So you have what is your business exactly?
Primarily commercial refrigeration, but we do kitchen equipment for commercial restaurants.
Oh, so it's a big giant.
Yeah, and we do residential, commercial, industrial heating and air conditioning. So,
Wyatt, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Did you have a question for Saint Nick?
I suppose.
Go ahead.
So, you say that you primarily do commercial refrigeration.
Yep.
Tell us about that. What kind of refrigeration stuff do you work on? Anything that stands out?
Well, we work on a lot of stuff, all the way from the small little reach-ins at the restaurants up to big warehouse coolers and grocery stores and whatnot. But, some of the most interesting stuff that we work on are put together by farmers.
Okay.
And you probably don't know what it is, but a raccoon freezer.
No, I don't. I mean, I think I can surmise what it is, but it's why are we freezing raccoons? Let's start there.
Well, in the fur trapping industry, you've got a brief period that they can go after them and whatnot. So they put all them in the freezer, and then they process them, whatnot.
Oh.
And
So they don't rot and gives them time to.
correct, gives them time to process.
Okay.
But when the freezer goes down, I have to crawl inside there and get to the equipment to fix it. And
It's
the raccoon,
nasty.
well, they're still frozen,
Okay.
but barely. So you're walking across them and they squeak. Squeak, squeak. You're just hoping that there isn't one still
My
kicking in there.
Lord. Nick, that's ridiculous.
The things we do.
So have you ever worked on mm, freezers are they freezers or refrigerators in morgues?
I have not done a morgue. I was asked to quote one, and that project never went through. But
Are those unique, or are they just basically a refrigerator for a human torso?
pretty much at its base level, it's a refrigerator.
Yeah.
Nothing special about it. In that application and in some other applications, vegetable storage and whatnot, we have to include coil coatings so that the coils don't rot because of various gases
Oh, I got you.
and whatnot. But nothing real special.
So
Might be interesting if you have to fix one.
yeah, no, for sure. Talk about not wanting to thaw out. So I'm going to ask you, and this is going to be a little. I'm trying to think of the word because I don't want it to sound self-serving, but I'm curious because you've been one of the oldest listeners. You kind of stumbled upon it when I probably first one day said, "Start anybody out there? I just want to talk." So you've been one of the most loyal listeners. So I'm curious, I guess, for my own interest. Because it's kind of like doing a show, like you were at the show last night. And by the way, this will be another interesting thing. Just to get an objective point of view, because all I ever know when I'm doing a podcast is this side, is me doing that and not knowing, is anybody interested in this? Does this make any sense? Is anybody being, and when I perform, I kind of gauge it on, okay, they're laughing. That's what they're supposed to do. I'm a comedian, and they seem to be clapping. They seem to be listening. So all I know is I guess they are enjoying the experience. But I don't really know what it is to be on the other side and just see it like a fan. And you've been to other shows of mine, but you've never been to one where it was brand new. This is the next album material. So what did you think about the show? And since I guess you have seen all of my comedy, do you think it was different in any ways than what I've done before, and in what way?
It's the same but different.
Okay.
I like how you work in the religion aspect and the truth. It gives you an icebreaker into religion, using comedy as that conduit for religion, and I really like that, and like that you're open and honest and willing to discuss issues that I think deep down a lot of people are saying, this is crazy, but I don't want to say anything.
Right. And do you think that it was able to make the point about encouraging people to be a little bit more bold and courageous and standing for truth? Because that's really what I wanted this to do, was make sure that people took this and ran with it in their sphere of influence. Because if it's just me doing it all day long, what good is it really going to do if it's not helping others get brave?
I think the room was very accepting of that, and hopefully that yields some results as far as people out there.
And what did you think about the material, without giving anything away? I mean, and again, I'm not trying to get a pat on the back. I'm just curious, for somebody that saw it fresh. Did you feel like, it's just kind of Brad Stine, I'm doing his thing, or was any of it kind of surprised you, or did any of it feel different in what I was doing compared to other things I've done in the past?
It was new. I liked a lot of the new stuff. You worked a few of the older bits into there, just a little bit here and there. That was great. And then, like you say, I've seen you at 3 live shows, and I get to see the difference, the progression, and how you handle different situations and read the room in different environments, and be in one church to another to a comedy club.
Yeah, right.
You get to see a big, wide progression in how you handle it.
Yeah. So you think it's going to be? How do you think people will perceive this album when it hits the market?
I think anybody that's willing to accept new information and take a minute just to laugh at maybe themselves or even the situation or the world that it is, you've got to be able to laugh. That whole court jester thing, that's able to make fun of the king.
Well, it's going to be maybe my most controversial, but for a reason. I've always tried to have a purpose behind everything I did. It wasn't just to be frivolous or to get away with
Yeah.
something, but I had something to say, and here's the laugh about it, make you feel uncomfortable, and then bring up your uncomfortableness and say, why do you feel that way, and what is this really going on that maybe needs to be addressed? And lastly, Nick, I'm very curious about the podcast because you're now on it, and this has been fun. Maybe it's an odd thing because you've been watching it for all these years with all the spectrum. Suddenly, you're the guy sitting here looking at it and going, "Oh, that's what this looks like," and how small it is, and the weird angles of all this stuff. Yeah, but talk to me about the podcast. What do you like about it? What is it that you feel is worth making this investment of your Monday nights so many years? You're obviously you got a successful business. You have a lot of things you could do with your life and your time, and you, for whatever reason, you've said, I'm going to do this Monday thing to get behind this. So what is it that you feel is worth that kind of an investment?
It's always good to laugh. It's always good to get new information. If you sit in your echo chamber, you're going to hear the same thing over and over. And some of the guests you bring on just brings to light something that I've never heard about, whether it's in factual information, if it's in scripture, if it's, a different way of thinking about the world. It's a lot of good information that if you hear from all different points of view, you can then begin to see, okay, this makes sense with this, and start connecting the dots.
The one thing that I was always very cognizant of when I started getting guests was I just wanted people that were interesting. I don't care if they're a Christian or not, as long as they're speaking truth. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to just bring somebody on just to necessarily battle with them, though that might happen too. Maybe I'll bring somebody on that I completely disagree with, and maybe there'll be some interesting inner dialogue between that. And I guess I've done that in the past. But I've had atheists, I've had sideshow performers, so I've had some very eclectic people on. But I always tried to have something in that could be informative and interesting to people and intriguing to them, I hope. And like you said, see a wide variety. I think of myself, typically a Christian podcast is going to have Christian guests. A comedian podcast is going to have comedians. Yep. And I see myself, the obvious, the big fish in the pond is Joe Rogan. It's the biggest in the world. But I saw myself more like that. He brings in everybody. Everybody. To me, that makes a more interesting podcast. And as a Christian, coming from a Christian conservative perspective, to bring in people with a different point of view, I think is important for Christians to learn how to go. Not everybody's going to think like you. They might even be antagonistic to what you believe. You got to know how to navigate that. You got to know how to talk about that. You know how to think about that. So can you think of it? Who's been your favorite guests over the years? Anybody come to mind?
Rick Green is a great guest. Yeah. I've gone through biblical citizenship and really found that helpful. Constitution Alive, I'm working on that a little bit at a time.
He's on tonight.
Yep.
So you'll get to see another angle of that. But you I was thinking about, well, you're not going to be able to interact, but you actually could from your hotel room if you're still there. You could go on and still do your typical "how you doing, guys," but now you get to see yourself. That's going to be an odd thing.
Yep.
But I think it's fun for people to get to know you guys, and it seems like you guys have made a little bit of a friendship of all of you guys who've never met for the most part. I don't know, maybe you guys have, but I think you guys have probably never met face to face.
No, I haven't met a lot of the people there. I think actually last night was probably the first time I met two people from the podcast. So,
did you know their names? Did they ever get on and speak on the thread?
No, I don't know their screen names.
Oh, okay.
But hello.
yeah, no kidding. Well, they're watching tonight. But anyways, I just, like I said, I do want to just go on record saying thank you for your support. You in the beginning, you donated, finances to to help this build, and it was not cheap. I mean, you see the cameras and stuff we have. This ain't cheap stuff. This is legit. But I figured if we're going to do it for God, let's do it at the best level we can. And little by little, it's unfortunate. I know you wanted to go see Wyatt at Lowe's. He has quit Lowe's, so the Lowe's lore will end. He quit. The last day was the day before you got here. Otherwise, you could have gone in and mocked him for that final.
I gotta find Wyatt at Lowe's so I can buy him buy wrenches from him.
I know that would have been so perfect. If had you not told him who you were at first, he wouldn't have even known, because Wyatt never recognizes anybody. But I do want to say thanks for your support and for all of your just believing in what I'm up to and what Wyatt and I are up to. I hope that, I know it's evolved a little bit from me just getting on and ranting all day long to him and I trying to find some fun as well as deep stuff. I hope do you think the stuff between Wyatt and I is fun for people? Do you think that's...
the banter is always great.
Okay, good. I just, again, you don't know. All you know is that you're trying something, you're hoping it works. And I hope there's a good mix of entertainment with substance.
Yep.
Because that's really what I wanted it to be. And if that's happening, then that's about all I can hope for. So
and getting to be here and see the banter portion, it's funny when you bring something up and all of a sudden Wyatt's back there scrambling on the computer, bringing up, whatever to look up what the word means and all that stuff.
Yeah, well, I've been blessed in that, my son has a sense of humor, but it's very different than mine.
Yep.
He's got a very dry, different, odd type of, and so I just think it makes for a good mix. If he was just like me, it'd be kind of redundant, but because we're so kind of clashy, I hope makes for an interesting dynamic amongst those who are watching, and hopefully this will grow. But the biggest thing for me, Nick, is that there's enough interest and intrigue and hopefully sophistication, and hopefully we'll continue to grow and bring even more interesting things that draw people to it, so they can walk away with a real desire to either be deeper in their faith or to come explore this God thing and say, you know what, I got to take this seriously. This is legitimately the single most important thing in your life is the God question. Because if he's real, you got some obligations to him, and that's what I've been trying to do. So, but thank you, buddy, for coming out here, and I hope everybody's had fun with St. Nick here. He just said that one of his favorite guests is Rick Green, and I think Rick has probably been on more than anybody. At first, it was because he was he's a friend, so he'd come on. I was nobody, so I just kind of pulled that ace up my sleeve and just abused his friendship, because he has gone on to have quite a connections to people within that are fairly sophisticated in the conservative movement around this country. But we are friends. We've done things together, and he created Patriot Academy, biblical citizenship, constitutional coaches. You can bring into your church. You can try to teach about the Constitution, teach about. And again, seriously, in the next few days, we might find out that that's going to become passé, because the Constitution means nothing if it's ignored or if it is overrun with totalitarianism. And believe it or not, it's that serious. So I hope that this interview with Rick will help you, will be inspiring to you. I hope that you guys continue to come back. And no matter what happens tomorrow, guys, pray for God's intervention. Pray for God's third great awakening. Pray that God will show mercy on us. But no matter what, even if our worst fears come true, everything that God does in his sovereignty is to drive you closer to him and to become more Christ-like, irrespective. And sometimes, folks, it's the harder things, the more difficult things, the more destructive things, the things that seem to be the most overwhelming, that are the only way that God can get your attention and get you to a connection to him that you would not have done on your own, because we're lazy and we want comfort, and God demands discipleship, and that's hard. And that's what we're shooting for. So, thank you guys again for showing up on Monday. We're going to continue to grow and add interesting, I hope, things to this podcast. We're going to continue to see what we can do with it. I hope that more of you guys someday will show up. Who knows what's coming? But sorry for the voice. Thanks for showing up anyways. And please enjoy this interview right before one of the biggest elections in our country with an old friend and a constitutional expert, America's Constitution coach, Rick Green. Please welcome our old friend, Rick Green. How are you, friend?
Brad, doing well. I think you just called me old. And
Yes.
you basically said that I violated that scripture about not being in your friend's house too much, that I've been here
Yes.
so much that you're tired of me. And so our show's over. See you. Thanks, man. That was it.
Well, listen, I just, I have to show some grace, and I have to show,
Yeah.
that I'm
You have to
willing
put up with
to
me.
bite the bullet
Yeah.
and bring
Mhm.
you on just to give you the illusion that you have
Yeah.
that you add some value to my life. I mean, I think that's what Jesus would have done.
Yeah, it's mercy is what you're saying. But
That's right.
in all seriousness, brother, I think it's that lions these days we're tired of the sheep and we're looking for some fellow lions. And I think we both see each other that way. And that's why I love locking shields with you, whether it's doing a show somewhere in the middle of nowhere, or doing something like this, or even just getting on the phone and saying, bro, what in the world is going on in our world, and what do we do about it? So I appreciate you
Well,
guys.
and and the beautiful thing is I know that you are proactive, as am I, in that we're actually trying to find solutions instead of complaining. A lot of podcasts, a lot of internet platforms, whether they're conservative or left leaning, it's really monetizing it. That's really what their main objective is. I'm not saying that maybe they believe or don't believe in what they're talking about. Maybe they do. I hope so. But the truth of the matter is, it's all about making dough, man. It's getting the clicks.
Yeah.
Let's wring our hands. Let's talk about, can you imagine if a conservative had tried that? Why, do you know what? And they're all
Right.
like, yeah, isn't that right? And we all feel good about ourselves because we're so victimized. Meanwhile, nothing changes. Nothing gets
Right.
better. Well, who cares?
It's all ranting, right? It's just ranting with no solutions, and then building the audience and getting people ginned up. But never, if you solve the problem, they couldn't monetize anymore. So it's
That's
like
it.
they don't
No,
want
no,
to
no.
solve
Well,
the
and
problem. So,
honestly,
yeah.
I mean, if we just jump right into the polluted swamp, it's kind of like
Yeah.
what we learned about the pharmaceutical industry and how they do. I mean, everything that seems so conspiratorial and crazy and just sort of dramatic to build an audience seems to be coming true. The pharmaceutical community during Corona proved that they don't care if you live or die as long as you take their crap and buy
Right.
their stuff, and they will pay and incentivize doctors and medical establishments tout their wares,
Poison you.
and
Yeah.
the public be damned. I don't care what it does to you,
Yeah.
as long as
Yeah.
I have a customer for life. So we're dealing in an existential crisis in America, and I don't see any. I'm very careful, understanding that everything I say on the internet will be seen by whoever, whether they are fans or not, and oftentimes they're not. But I feel like, Rick, and because your expertise is not only as a Christ follower, but as a patriot and as an understander of the Constitution and our heritage as Americans, which we need to know, we need to understand our
Yeah.
foundations so that we can get back to true north. We need to know what started the game instead of making up the rules as we go. So we need to readdress, what did the founders think? There's a reason why we say the founders said this and that. There's a reason we go back to the original rule book instead of altering things so that we can figure out a standard that everybody can agree upon. Because otherwise, we're just going to be in conflict until the person who gets the most power takes control. So this to me is
Yeah.
a soft civil war.
We can look at those guys too for even just strategy, right? I mean, listen, if you were gonna play chess and take it serious, you'd study the greats, right? You'd study their moves. You'd study. You would want to know who did this game better than anybody else, and how did they do it, and what can I learn from them? Well, I mean, the founding fathers of America did this game of politics, of society, of freedom better than anybody in history. So, I mean, I'm not worshiping those guys, but I'd sure like to know what in the world they were thinking and how they did it and what they did whenever they had conflict amongst themselves, what they did when the odds seemed overwhelming, against the other side. All of those things are important to know. I mean, we'd be fools to just say, let's remake the world and how we feel like it should be done, right? And we're faced, like you said, with an existential threat of what America is going to look like. It's a very different world right now than when you and I were in high school or even 20 years ago. It's a substantially different ballgame. There is actually a global communist revolution, as James Lindsay puts it, happening right now. There's no doubt about it in countries all over the world. unfortunately, I mean, the fact that it's actually gaining ground here is shocking. I mean, the closest we've been, we're way past where in the 50s and 60s when Reagan was fighting the communists in Hollywood, right? And they had that big Cleon Skousen spoke at this massive rally in Hollywood. I can't remember the stadium that they used, but I mean, it was Jimmy Stewart and John Wayne and Ronald Reagan and all these people. It was like 1959, I think it was. And they all, and this massive rally and all the speeches and the things they were saying, Brad, it's the same stuff you and I are saying today. And they won. They beat back communism.
Yeah.
And we had really a 40, 50-year benefit from that. So that's another generation that we can learn from. Actually, what did the Duke do? Right? What was the mindset in John Wayne and Ronald Reagan and all these guys when what did Skousen teach them and live in his Naked Communist book that still applies today? So anyway, I didn't mean to filibuster on you there, but I think it is so important to look back to people that did it well, and say, let's learn from them, not just try to figure this out on our own.
No, well, filibuster away whenever you feel so led, because that's what I wanted this particular interview this time between you and I to be. More about a couple men who just are trying to walk through what's really taking place and try to understand it, try to maybe illuminate for people watching what's at stake, and maybe to understand some of the ramifications of some of the cultural issues that seem to have kind of no connection to freedom and liberty in the long run. But of course they do, because anything that causes you especially to self-censor, that causes you to feel unsafe to speak your mind, anything that tells you to ignore reality for the sake of peace is cancer. It's destroying the host. It's a whitewashed sepulcher. Still looks like America's here, but it is rotting on the inside, and that house cannot stand. So let's see if we can figure out kind of some of the pieces of this puzzle that has happened in the last number of years, and see if we can find
Brad, can I want to brag on you for a second, because you were way ahead of the curve on this. And it was because of, and you talk about this in our shows, that for a comedian, freedom of speech is absolutely essential. And you're like the canary in the coal mine in terms of when they start silencing you or saying some jokes are off limits. And gosh, man, 15 years ago, I remember you warning about this, that if they start deciding what's okay to say, that will eventually lead to really important things not being allowed to be said. And then boom, man, COVID hits in 2020. And it was exactly what you warned against. And we weren't even allowed to talk about things that were affecting people's lives and their health and their freedom and their money and their business and all of these things. So the principle is, I guess is what I'm saying, is that you were talking about 15 years ago, like you're saying, where people may think, well, that's not connected to this over here. Absolutely was, and actually ended up being, it's a linchpin. And as RFK and others are saying right now, I think Elon Musk maybe says it a lot as well. The guys that are silencing everybody else are never the good guys. If you're shutting down free speech and you're not allowing the other side to speak, those are not the good guys. They are not out for your goodwill and protecting you.
Well, so let's jump into that, since that's kind of the premise that has launched this conversation. Because again, I want to tap into your expertise as America's Constitution coach, and this is your expertise. So let's talk about the First Amendment, because that's the one that virtually everybody pretends that they understand. So if you ever hear your average citizen talk about the Constitution, so, well, the First Amendment, you never even say, the 12th Amendment, they never bring that one up. It's always like they know one, and the only thing they seem to know about the First Amendment is that it's crucial that there's a separation of church and state. That is the only thing the First Amendment was created for, was to make sure that your stupid religion gets nowhere near the public's.
No, remember Rob Reiner? It's in there 3 times. Separation of church and state 3 times. No, not even once. But Rob Reiner was so sure that it was in there.
I know.
3 times.
Well, and there was a reason why they called him Meathead back in the 70s when he was on All in the Family. So now I'm really dating myself. Which, by the way, in this day and age,
I'll call you Archie from now on.
In this day and age, dating yourself is actually not off limits. Now I'm really pushing it. So let's talk about the First Amendment, because that is kind of I don't know if we can actually say, I don't want to get hyperbolic, because that's something for a comic. It's easy for me to do that. Would it be fair to say, let's start this, so you can correct me as I go off sideways, that the amendments, did they accidentally end up in the order that they are in? Or do you feel like they were cognizant of what will be most important to create the foundations? As we add each amendment, we need a architectural structure that's robust enough to be able to contain the rest of these and keep them sturdy. So that sounds like a poetic way of thinking. That's why they put the First Amendment in there. That means that yes, there will be you can publicly and privately practice your religion. The government will never intervene in any way to keep you from doing that, which was the First Amendment's purpose, was to keep the government away from religion. Two, that you could redress your government, and they can't come in the night and shoot you or take you off to the stocks. That you can't have the government going in and altering what the press wants to say or things about what's newsworthy or facts and information. That you could protest and not be, as long as it was peaceful, without being thrown in jail. So it really, whether they meant to or not, brilliantly decided, before we even talk about everything else, this is the closest thing to transcendence, to the holy, to the sacred in the Constitution, because it dealt with my conscience, how I saw the world, how I wanted to behave in the world, that I could be true to myself, that I didn't have to self-censor. I never had to worry about the government deciding what is off limits for me to speak about.
Yeah.
So do you believe that they were cognizant enough and prescient enough to put these in order of how they thought would allow the rest of this to all work together? Or did they just kind of serendipitously or providentially make the First Amendment what it stood for, and that is freedom of thinking and speaking as an autonomous, liberty-loving American?
Well, first of all, your description of all 5 protections in the First Amendment is exactly right. It all falls under the banner of freedoms of conscience, which is exactly the word you use. So that is 100% right. And you need that structure first before you get into due process and all the other things that are in the Bill of Rights. And then it does end the 9th and 10th Amendments with the overall structure of, hey, we haven't covered 9th Amendment. We haven't covered all your freedoms in here. We're just listed certain things. This is mostly about government, not you. And in the 10th Amendment, the things we haven't mentioned, by the way, are left to the people in the states. However, the one thing that kind of stands in our way of this poetic theory here is that originally it was 12 amendments that went to the states, and the first and the second did not get ratified. And they were had nothing to do with what you and I are talking about. Like, the first one was, how many members of Congress would there be for every 30,000 or 50,000 people, and that one didn't get ratified. And then the second one had to do with congressional pay, which is seems like a really small thing, right? And then that later got ratified as number 27. So it's the last amendment to be ratified 200 years later. So that kind of messes up our beautiful theory. When you look at the beautiful Bill of Rights, which we have hanging on the wall downstairs, I'm at the Patriot Academy campus right now, up in a committee room. But when you look at the original Bill of Rights as it was signed by John Adams as the Senate president, and Muhlenberg, Frederick Augustus Muhlenberg, a pastor, by the way, rights of conscience, freedom of religion, who was Speaker of the House at the time. So as that was signed when Congress proposed it, and remember, Congress doesn't put it in the Constitution, it just says, hey, states, here's some things we think you should do. Step 1 is done, sends it back to all the states, and the states, when they ratified it, they didn't do number 1 and number 2. Anyway, I say all that to say, I don't think they necessarily did, but as God would have it, what ultimately got ratified is exactly what you just described. It's a beautiful step-by-step process. I might even consider, if it were me, putting the Second Amendment ahead of the first, to say, you have the right to self-defense and to hold your government at bay so that you can have the freedom of conscience and live that out without them violating that. And then if they do, or if you're charged with something that says that you can't do these things now, then you get, all your rights against unreasonable searches and seizures, and you get your right to confront witnesses, and you get your, all the due process stuff in the 4th, 5th, 6th, and then jury in the 7th, and no excessive bail and fines in the 8th, and then, as we mentioned, 9th and 10th. So I don't know, man. I don't know. You've got me curious, though. I'm going to go back and reread a lot of the debates at the convention, to see, I mean, in Congress in 1791 when they were doing the Bill of Rights, and see if there was a discussion about that they should be in this order, because I don't remember that part, but it certainly fits. And I think when we look at it, we have to say, I mean, this is why people came here, man. This is what made the Americas so appealing to people who were under thought police and everything that they did in Europe. And they wanted to be where they could think freely. And remember how you had all these different religions in the different colonies, different Christian religions, like different sects of Christianity that hated each other, thought very different about God and how this thing was going to work and how they wanted to live it out. So not just the right of conscience, but how to actually live it out. And so Pennsylvania was different from Virginia, and Virginia was different from Georgia. And you know, everybody kind of had their own flavor and had the right to live it out. So anyway, that is definitely the foundation of liberty, and without it, and that's why they're after. That's why people that aren't even Christians are starting to figure this out, man. That's why Elon Musk and Joe Rogan and all these guys are going, whoa, wait, you can't tell me what to think. And frankly, you know, you've said this from the stage before in some of our shows. Liberals used to get this, man. Liberals used to be the first ones to say, you can't tell me what to say. I mean, ACLU, they made their name by suing based on, let this weirdo say whatever weirdo thing they want to say. And I mean weirdo in that they're not fitting in. They're extraordinary, not normal to the community, but they have the right to say what they want to say that's different from everybody else. Where's the ACLU today, man? Where are they in defending our freedom of speech and our rights of conscience? And
you know,
so anyway, yeah.
Well, but it's interesting, Rick, because okay, so one of the things that God has really pressed upon me in the last, I don't know, year or so, is that we were never called to be Christians. The Bible didn't say go forth and make Christians. It said go forth and make disciples.
Disciples, that's right.
I need you to be disciplined. I need you to understand why you believe what it is, that you are committed to this God Almighty who did dimensionalize himself and die for you and come back to life to see you through the blood of his son so that you are perfect in that God died for you. Crazy story, or the greatest story there ever was. We find ourselves easily persuaded to our point of view. Once you believe something, you're going to make enemies, because somebody's going to disbelieve that and consider it wrong or bad or hurtful or harmful to my point of view. But the other thing that's interesting is that your cognitive bias, which we all have, wants to see information to fit what we believe to be true. That's just kind of a natural human trait. Once I believe something is true, I try to make everything fit. That's what cognitive bias is, or cognitive.
It's your paradigm, right? It's how you see the world.
It's your worldview.
So everything.
It's your worldview, and you see it through that lens. But the problem, and that's okay. You should see, as a Christian, I should see the world through the lens of Christ and God's principles. I should, because it's the truth. That's what he says. So I should act as such and be that way. So there's a difference, though, between sort of a bias, which is not necessarily bad. Why should I feel bad about being biased against communists? It's evil. I'm a bigot towards communists. I'm a bigot towards Nazism. I give no quarter to it. I give no line to it. I give no grace to it at all. I want it dead. Yeah. That's a bigotry. Yeah. And it's holy, and it's good, and it's sacred, because you shouldn't give any quarter to demonic evil forces. But here's what's interesting.
Love what God loves and hate what God hates.
Yes. But
I'm glad you said quarter, because I skipped the Third Amendment a while ago. So yes, folks, there is the Third Amendment, quartering soldiers. I don't know where it should have fit. Sorry, go ahead, Brad.
Well, but again, they also were very pragmatic. They had just dealt with these issues.
That's right.
In real time. People really would suddenly come up and say, it's like a policeman coming to your house and saying, I'm going in the master bedroom now, and you're going to, and then bring me my breakfast in the morning. You go, what? And that's how it was. Yes. So they were dealing with what was really happening at the time, practically. But the ACLU, I think in the 70s, just to give you an example of why I'm bringing up cognitive bias and dissonance, is they defended a parade. I think it was in Skokie, Illinois, or something like that. You might remember this, but it wasn't. I think it was Ku Klux Klan or neo-Nazis. I forgot now. But they wanted to march. It's like in the 70s or maybe 60s, but I think 70s. And the ACLU defended them. their right to, and it was either Nazis or Ku Klux Klan. So we're talking about some nasty ideology.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I remember thinking, I don't know if I would have been young, so I don't know that I was sitting there dealing with cultural, political issues at the time, but perhaps maybe learning about it in school, thinking to myself, well, why would they defend them? Forget those guys. I don't want them marching down a guy in a freaking robe and his pointed white. Yeah, I don't want, get rid of them. They're evil. And they said, no, they have the right to speak their point of view in the public sphere without fear of injury or arrest. And I realized how important that was.
Dude, we did it in the 40s. There was a Nazi rally in New York. And the police and everybody else protected them and made sure that they could have their speeches and do their, and when people heard what they had to say, it died out. People were like, oh my gosh, these people are evil,
Yeah.
That's the arena of ideas, right? That you put your idea out there, and then Brad and I are going to slap it down with our words. We're going to intellectually do battle with you. That's the beauty of having free speech. And granted, when you have a dumbed down nation where the education system has failed so miserably, people are going to be they're foolish. They're going to fall for fluffy speeches, and they're going to fall for lies that are packaged well. And that's life, man. That is life. And if you give someone the power to define and decide what misinformation is, you're done. At that point, you're in the George Orwell Ministry of Truth, and there is some government entity that is always going to define that in a way that holds on to power for them. And that's what we're watching happen right now. That's why Kamala wants to cancel Elon and all that, right? They don't want free speech because it's a threat to their power. It's not a threat to democracy. It's a threat to their power. That's what it's a threat to.
Of course, because an individual, autonomous, free agent who can think for himself and does not immediately follow the crowd or the identity politics or the mob, but is willing to stand alone, even if it costs him everything, is the single most dangerous threat to these people, because they cannot stand people that are courageous and care more about an idea than their life.
That's right.
That is beyond.
That's it.
That can't be.
Who is John Galt? That is the guy that says, I'm not going to follow along. It is the biggest threat. That's why they hate Trump. That's why they hate Elon Musk. That's why they hate the church that's standing up right now. The pastors that are engaging are the biggest threat to this global communist takeover. I mean, they're the biggest threat, because what are they doing? They're teaching people to think for themselves. They're teaching people to do exactly what you just described. And Brad, I will say this to our general subject of what do we do? What are the action steps? How do we respond to what's going on? I'm sitting in this committee room. We have 6 committees here at Patriot Academy. One of them is the William Wilberforce Committee. Look, this dude spent 4 decades, almost 5 decades of his life in Parliament trying to end slavery. And then his second big thing was to make being good fashionable again, to restore manners, to restore morals in the society. It did not happen overnight. You and I have been at this together for 15, 16 years now. It's going to be another 15 to 25 years of turning this thing around. Even the revolution, we were talking about learning from the ones, that did it so well. I mean, my goodness, guys, the Boston Massacre, 1770, 1771, I can't remember. And you don't have the Bill of Rights that we just got through talking about until 1791. That's 20 years of getting from, okay, we're fighting now, to, wow, we actually have this enshrined in a document and people are going to follow this. 20 years, that's a generation. So just to set the stage for when Brad and I talk about go do this, go do that, this is not as long as Trump wins the White House, or as long as, so-and-so gets Speaker of the House, or as long as governor, whatever, it's never one battle, man. This is a price of freedom's eternal vigilance. The price is high. As Thomas Paine said, heaven knows how to put a proper price on her goods, and how strange indeed it would be if so celestial an item as freedom were not highly valued, right? If it wasn't,
how did these guys learn
so
to talk
valuable,
like that?
It wouldn't cost so much. Oh my goodness, man! I wish I could. Yeah. Anyway, just to set the stage, it's gonna take time, and Brad's gonna be dead and gone. He's a lot older than me, but I'll still be around to watch with my cane and my long beard and do my best Gandalf impersonation to see it when it happens. But Brad will be looking down from heaven.
Yes, and no, I won't. I won't give a crap about you guys. I'll be in heaven. I will be in my mansion in my jacuzzi.
Yeah.
I'm done. I did my job. I'm out. Good luck, Rick. You can take it from here. Try to make them laugh now. You lost your best asset. But here's the thing. I guess, harkening back to what I prefaced this, and again, incredible insight. That's why I brought you on. But when I talked about that Skokie thing and whatever, what I was getting at was this, in the discipline of a disciple. What I was getting at was this, and this is another thing we hear a lot about, is hate speech. See, I'm going to start creating new videos, I think, that I want to do as a hybrid of PragerU and Babylon Bee, because my flavor is comedy, but I do care about truth and reality. So I thought,
but it packs a punch, man. Yeah, it packs a punch.
So that's the thing I want to put together and see if I can, and just have these simple ways and entertaining ways, hopefully, of providing information with the hope that it inspires and maybe changes some people. I can't change a far left advocate for progressivism. It's a religion. It is a religion, so I can't fix that. These people are unteachable. They are in the cult fully, and God even speaks of people that can. There are people that He gives over that can never come back. They're gone.
That's right.
And all they have left is to take as many people to hell with them, because that's where they're heading. For those of us who claim to be Christ followers, which means we care about truth more than anything, for those who claim to be patriots, so we care about this nation and its traditions and its values and its history, so those of us who claim to care about free speech, we have to be just as vigilant to realize that means you have to allow, as fragile or volatile as it is, you have to allow someone to run for president that's basically a communist. You have to allow that if you really care about free speech, because the only way you can define for yourself, if you truly believe in free speech, because everybody says they do, is this: do you allow speech you hate?
That's it.
Yep. You don't. You do not care about free speech, because free speech means nothing if I say, as long as it's what I believe in. It's not free. It's my
You don't need an amendment to the Constitution to protect love speech, right?
That's right. That's it.
Love speech is gonna, it's hate speech, absolutely, and it's gonna be things you disagree with.
But let's take this.
And to be fair, let's do say, listen, there are things that actually are causing real violence, and there are things that are libel or slander, and you have the civil courts to go after someone and say, you can't say that. That is not true. You lied about Brad. He's not actually a girl and a transgender and all of that, despite the long hair. All that.
No, but this is important.
You know what I mean? That is absolutely unconstitutional for someone to try to hide behind
the simple category distinctions that you made, because it's never about, I don't want you to make fun of me, or I don't allow you or give you permission legally to mock or ridicule me. That's what the left wants to destroy. They don't want to be mocked, ridiculed, or they don't even want you to be able to disagree with them, because when you do, their house immediately crumbles.
They don't have any way to defend it.
Because they have nothing, because there's nothing they stand for that anybody would want if they had a logical mind. It's absurd. But you talked about there is limits to free speech, but notice what those limits are: lying, slander,
which is not.
So slandering, which I think is speaking it, and libel, which I think is in written form, or it's one or the other.
It's flipped.
Is it flipped? Okay. Slander is written and libel is speaking it. Either way, it's a lie. So notice why is that free speech limited? Because it's not speech. You're not communicating, because you're withholding reality.
That's good. You're not actually, you're distorting reality too.
So that's not actual speech. That is pure propaganda, and it is designed to diminish and to destroy somebody's access to freedom through a lie. And that's a whole different story. It's essentially crying fire in a theater. It's a lie. If I'm in a theater, Rick, and the place catching on fire, I'm allowed to say fire because it's on fire. I'm not allowed to lie about it.
By the way, I said that backwards. I knew my brain was going. You said that wrong, Rick. You said that backwards. Not enough coffee. Yeah, it's. I had it. You had it exactly right, and I flipped it. So libel is written, slander is oral. There we go. Just so our folks know, we're trying to get that right, so they know.
But my point,
your point
the thing
stands.
that they always bring up is the fire in the crowded theater, and like I said, but wait a minute, what if there is a fire in a crowded theater? Then I can say fire.
Right.
I can't pretend. I can't lie about it because the lie causes confusion, chaos, and harm. And it's just an idea.
Yeah.
Fire. No, there isn't. But people respond as though it's true and it has consequences. That's why the truth is
there it is.
So let's talk about this quickly.
And by the way, for our faith crowd out there that shares our faith, the Bible speaks to this, right? When you reject the truth, when you no longer love the truth, when you reject the truth, you buy the lie, you act on it, what you just said, and you suffer the consequences for it, right?
Well, and Jesus also said that the father of lies is Satan. So everything that deals with a lie is literally demonic. It's the language of Satan, because Satan takes everything holy and tries to make it profane. He takes everything that is true and tries to turn it false. He takes the beautiful creation of male, female, and tries to distort it and destroy it. All he can do is destroy. He can't create. He can't do something beautiful. He can only take a hammer to something God has done. And that's all he has. He's going to hell.
And that's why the left, what is it, Dennis Prager's line? The left destroys everything it touches. That's exactly what they're doing. They're taking these good things. Yep. It's all it can do. But I do want to ask you. They're even making the Secret Service inept. I mean, come on. The left destroys DEI, all that leftist philosophy, destroying this incredible institution that was so good at defending and protect. Anyway.
So let's start. Okay, so I want to tap into your expertise right now on two subjects that have ended up in this conversation. Number one, let's start with the speech thing, since we were elaborated on that. Okay, so hate speech. That's not really, in my opinion, that's not really even an accurate description of, there's no definition that makes sense to me. What does that mean, hate speech? In other words, I can't say, I hate you. Are you saying it should be illegal to say, I hate women, I hate old people? Is that what you're saying? Is that what hate speech is? Or is it speech
that's a good way to describe it.
Towards people? What exactly is hate speech? And by the way, why are you saying that we don't have the right to do that? And this is going back to the Nazi march or whatever. I would rather, Rick, know that you're a bigot, a racist.
That's good. Yeah.
I would rather you be able to tell me, you are also, I believe in pedophilia, and if I get a hold of your grandkid, I'm going to rape him. I want to know.
Now I know the warning sign's there, and
So I'm keeping you away from my house. You're not going to get anywhere near my son. I see you. You are a threat. You told me exactly who you are. And guess what? I'm going to allow you to speak that for two reasons. One, I now have information I needed, so I know who the threat is. But number two, the culture will weed you out organically.
That's right. That's right. And there's another, we didn't mention this, but then there's the whole debate in the free speech realm of what obscenity is and what is not acceptable in the public for minors, or even for what you want on billboards in your community, right? There is a limitation on even those kind of things, because that's now not your private space, that's now in the public space. That's a whole nother debate. But I mean, those are important things to realize, because they're really good. The left, and you've talked about this too, the left is really good at taking their leftism and their Marxism that's so destructive and packaging it in our language or in our values and making it sound like, but this is just free speech, or this is just my religion, or this is just whatever. And it's a poison pill, right? It's something that they know is going to destroy and rot the culture so that they can remake it in what they want. And we've got to what we do about it. I mean, we have to start being wise as serpents, and we have to be able to distinguish and to see through these things. And you can't do that if you don't have truth. So if you don't study to know truth, if you don't saturate your mind in truth, you don't recognize that lie. You actually fall for that stuff. There are good people out there right now that are absolutely buying the lie, and they're falling for these soft, fluffy, feel good policies that will absolutely undermine and destroy the country. But the reason they're doing that is because they never learned civics in school. They never learned how the economy works. They never learned what produces. They never learned the importance of what we just talked about, protecting free speech. So we have to be so willing to use our free speech and to teach others and to become champions for truth. And first, we have to have it, right? We have to saturate in truth. But then, man, we got to be bold. We got to find other people that we can build community with right there in our neighborhoods and in our churches and in our families, and people like coworkers and others that share these values, and then start sharpening each other, and iron sharpening iron, and then tend the garden, be out there actually taking care of what's going on in the community. So that's kind of a short formula for all the things that need to happen over the next 2 decades. Get saturated in truth. So there's a lot of things we do to do that. Build community, find other people you can team up with, and then start taking care of the garden, pulling up the weeds, getting rid of the evil that's in your sphere, and rebuilding the wall. Sword in one hand, trowel in the other, actually working on rebuilding community, rebuilding society to be a place where you want to raise your children and grandchildren.
But without but because we are a constitutional republic, whenever there's an impasse of ideas, we go to the Constitution. We have to go to the rule book, so to speak, because we're all playing in the same game. So we need to know what the rules are. Am I allowed to go counterclockwise? Nope. You only go clockwise. Can I roll the dice 3 times? Nope. You only get 1 roll. I mean, we need to know what's the game rules. So when we get off track, we can go, well, wait a minute. Whoa. Get the rule book out. So you can't do that. This is already established. So that sounds nice. And that sounds hopeful. Oh, at least we can always head back to the original intent of the Constitution. What happens when when the institutions, the people that you vote for, and by the way, a vote is simply someone who is representing your voice in the House and Congress. So I'm not voting for them to go rule me. I'm voting for them to represent me. So when I give them my vote, it's not so you can go in and decide what you want to do. It's to say, here's what I believe. Go take it to Congress and let them know. That's kind of what this is supposed to be. Well, what happens when the Constitution is no longer being defended? What happens, for example, like we look at some of the I'm trying to think of if there's a specific case, because everybody thinks the Constitution is breached when their point of view is not being given a priority. But when we look at let's take the border. Let's take something we all know is happening. Yeah. Okay, so constitutionally, isn't there something within that? And that's why I'm pleading ignorance. You are America's Constitution coach. Isn't there something clearly in our Constitution, our rights as a sovereign nation, to simply decide who comes into our country to participate in it? Let's start.
There's two very clear clauses. Article 4, Section 4 gives that responsibility to Congress to secure the republic, protect the republic, and also immigration is given to Congress. And so it is a federal responsibility. They're supposed to do that. And then there's federal laws, not just the Constitution itself, but federal laws on the books about how that should work and how many are allowed to come in at a time and what you're supposed to do to be able to come in legally. All of that stuff absolutely should be followed. And so when it's not being followed, what you're saying, there's an escape clause for the states in Article 1, Section 10, where the states can actually be the ones to secure that border, not let people in illegally, and literally defend the border the way that the Congress is supposed to be doing it, which is why I've been screaming at the top of my lungs for 4 years for Texas to do that, for New Mexico to do that, for these individual states, Arizona and others to do that. It's also why, Brad, just from a practical political perspective, this is why they had to prevent Kari Lake from being governor of Arizona, because she was running on a platform to do exactly that. Greg Abbott in Texas has talked a good game, and he's done a little bit, and there's been some of that. And there has been some clash between Texas and the federal government, some cases that have gone up through the system regarding who has the power to do that. So there's a struggle right now to determine who's going to actually do this. If one side's saying, for political reasons, right, there's a reason that the Biden administration, the Biden-Harris administration, has purposely allowed 21 million people to come across the border illegally. It's a political game for them. They're registering these people illegally. They're violating the Constitution all over the place. So to your point, okay, well, if one group is doing that in America, how do we stop them? What are the mechanisms? And if those mechanisms fail, what's the fail safe for the next thing that we do so that we don't end up in war, that we don't end up in a civil war and have to take up arms to stop this thing? And so if the states fail to pick up the pieces and do what the feds should be doing, at some point the whole system collapses. There is no, if you do not stand up and assert your constitutional rights, those rights start going away. And we're watching that happen right before our eyes. We're not there yet. It's not completely over, but we're reaching a point where the other side has accomplished the first step. 21 million people coming in to dilute the American population, people that don't know what the Constitution is or why they want the economic freedoms that America has. They don't understand any of that. Also, those who are nefarious, right? All of that. We can spend all day on that. We all know that. You've talked about it enough. But once that's done, now what? How do you actually turn that around? Now, there is an effort, and there's some talk, no action yet, but talk of actually starting to enforce the border to deport 21 million people. Now, that is not all talk. I should say that has happened before. Dwight Eisenhower deported over 1 million illegal aliens. So he did actually do what Donald Trump is saying that he will do. Trump 10 times that is what he's saying that he will do. It can be done. It must be done if we're going to save the republic. I don't know whether or not the political will is there to do it or not. You know, they're talking a good game now in the campaign. Let's say Trump wins the election. Will he have a Congress that will enforce it? Will he stand his ground and make it a non-negotiable? I mean, we just watched, you know, the Republicans cave on the whole. Yeah, by the way, you can't vote if you're an illegal alien thing. I mean, who would have thought that we would ever even have to debate that? And now we don't even have that in the negotiations for the continuing resolution for the budget. The Republicans should have just absolutely refused to move that forward. But you had 14 Republicans that sold out the speaker and sold out the. Anyway, I don't want to just complain today, but those are the places, those are the moments where we had a chance to right the ship and didn't.
No, but
so we've had failure after failure after failure.
But that's all we hear, Rick.
Yeah,
that's all we hear is they didn't do it. They didn't do it. Now I've told you this a long time ago. I find the Republicans more despicable than the Democrats, and the reason is it's kind of going back to that free speech thing I was talking about. Democrats have made it very clear what they believe. If you want to have an abortion and that baby is delivered undead, kill it. We're okay with that. We want God out of our platform. If you want to come across this border, we don't care why or who or where you come from. Come on in, vote for us. If you want pornography for children in schools, we will support that.
Mm-hmm.
We'll make sure that is happening. And if you try to fight against it, we'll bring FBI agents to your home to stop. I mean, these people have made it very clear that we are on the side of the demonic. We are 100% all in. The cult, the religion of demons is us. Okay, I don't like that, but I get it. I'm fighting. Listen, I'm a Christ follower. I've been fighting Satan and his minions since I've accepted Christ. I believe in the spiritual realm. So I'm not blown away that these people have decided to outwardly say what many people have done inwardly for thousands of years anyways, which is follow Baal and worship idols. So they're not doing anything that's shocking as far as where did this come from? You were such good people up until 2 weeks ago.
Right. But too many of our side just go, ho hum. Okay. You know, so big deal. Let them do what they're
But Rick, if you and I were out in some war-torn scenario and it was just you and me and it was like, holy smoke, we got to get to the base camp. Listen, you watch my back and I'll watch you. You got it, Brad. I got your 6 and you got my 12. Let's roll. And I'm heading up there, and then it's one day I turn around and go, where'd you go? And you had already hidden somewhere because you joined the enemy, and then they kill me. Who's more despicable? The enemy that already told me I'm here to kill you, or the guy that said I will protect you? And then so to me, demons are less despicable than Judas.
Right. No, I'm telling you, it's sickening. And it's been that way my whole 30 years I've been in this fight. And the most painful moments are when it's the ones, you remember the scene in Braveheart, whenever he tackles Robert the Bruce and pulls off the mask and realizes Robert the Bruce is the one that turned against him, and he thought he was his friend and his ally, and he had gone back and joined the king again and fought with him in that battle. And that's the most painful scene. That hurt worse than at the end when he's being disemboweled. And so, yeah, and believe me, that is part. The founders experienced the same stuff, right? You had 25% of the country that were siding with the Tories, that were turning on the Patriots and all that kind of stuff. So it's the nature of man. It happens all the time. I think, Brad, I honestly believe this. I do believe we are reaching a true turning point, and it's because the pain is starting to be felt by more and more people. So we all keep seeing the memes. Everybody's starting to say this now. We've been saying this for years, but tough times, tough men, good times, soft men, tough times. So we've been in the soft, enjoying freedom, weak men. We became weak because people weren't willing to do what it takes to save freedom for so long in this country, that now we're entering the tough times. We've let weak men run this country and take over the institutions of America. And now they've given in to the Marxists, who are not weak. They are what you just said. They've been scratching and clawing for 100 years. Seth Gruber's new movie, incredible. So here we are. And more people are finally waking up. I just had lunch with some guys yesterday, and to hear them talk, I was like, wow, they get it. They're where you and I were 10 years ago. But it's happening. It's happening. More and more people are waking up to this, and people that we would have never thought. Let me say it like this: we're in an epic struggle where the nation is divided, so much so that we're at each other's throats. And one side has the power; they have the institutions, and they are persecuting the other side, who is scrappy and a bunch of deplorables, and they are fighting back. And it's very similar. There's an exact biblical story where this happened. Nation is split. One side has the power. They're persecuting the other side. They try to assassinate the leader of the other side. Sounds familiar. Doing everything they can to silence the other side. And there are now some on the side with the power that are so disgusted by how bad the persecution is, and so disgusted by how the violations of the Constitution, if you will, and the rule of law in that country are. They're so disgusted that they start defecting and coming over to the scrappy side, and the scrappy side starting to win some battles and get stronger and stronger. And there is a point in time where it gets so bad that there's a certain group that switches sides. And this group that switches sides, there's 200 leaders. They bring 87,000 of their family members. And the 200 leaders understood the times and knew what to do. They were known as the sons of Issachar, the men of Issachar. And it was an absolute turning point to power switching, and King David ultimately becoming, and the scrappy deplorables that were initially just a bunch of ragtag right criminals in the cave with David, now have swelled to become the winners. I think we're at that kind of point right now, when RFK and Elon Musk and Joe Rogan and Tulsi Gabbard and all these people that had been on the other side are starting to say, wait a minute, this team that used to stand for what we believe in and used to defend the Constitution, used to be against forever wars, and used to be against the pharmaceutical companies forcing this stuff, and now they're actually sold out to all of that? And no, we're switching sides and we're coming over here. I think that's the moment we're in. It does not mean the battle's over. It means we got a lot of people to wake up. There's some people that will never wake up. There's some people that'll be what you described earlier. They're sold out to evil and they're never going to come over. But man, I'm watching them in droves. You and I see pockets, brush fires of liberty all over the country, brush fires of revival all over the country. Will it happen in time before we lose the freedoms that give us the ability to fight back? That I don't know. But I know I'm going to use the weapons of warfare that I've been given, which is this voice, my vote, my ability to rally other people. That's the fight we're in right now. It's not a kinetic civil war. It's what you said earlier. It is a civil war, but it's a militia of the mind. It's an opportunity to use all of those rights of conscience that you talked about earlier. And if we use those and enough people do it, we can prevent that kinetic war, and we can actually save this country and turn it back to everybody having freedom of conscience and being able to live out the First Amendment.
But
if we don't,
one of the other things that has been so disheartening for me, though, too, Rick, is because I believe in justice. Again, that's a very Judeo-Christian idea of justice. So remember, once
absolutely,
the monotheistic religion of Judaism that launched monotheism, it had never existed in human history. It was always polytheists and animists. Rocks are gods and whatever. And here comes this Abraham going, there actually is one God. It's not all these other guys. And here's the rules. changed everything, because nobody had known that there's an actual leader, a transcendent mind that put everything into place, not only created everything, but gives us access to logic and reason, and observe his handiwork, and participate in it, and procreate, and look at governments in the sovereign way that he put into place to keep things at peace, and to keep things in balance, and to keep things that those who are victims can be defended. So there's this beautiful sort of way of defending the innocent, and defending those who cannot defend themselves. And what the other thing that has been so frustrating for me, and I'm sure everybody else, I'm just representing these conservative voices, is when people were caught in their schemes, were not prosecuted. So if if you can not only do evil things that are against America's freedom and America's best interest, and then when caught, there are
Not
no
be punished.
repercussions. I
Yeah,
am
you're going to do it
not
again,
going.
and others are going to do it.
I'm
Yeah,
not changing
yeah.
my.
No, no,
Why
no,
would I
dude.
change?
It is a linchpin to restoring the country. There's a verse in Isaiah 126. I actually wrote it downstairs. We had on the other side of this wall. There's a house chamber. We built our own legislative hall here at Patriot Academy, and the dais is an exact replica of the Texas House chamber dais. When the last piece of trim was being put on that, underneath I wrote Isaiah 126. I'll give you lawyers is at the beginning, judges is at the first, then you will be the righteous city. You just nailed the linchpin. If we don't have justice, biblical justice, the whole system falls apart. You have to have biblical justice where everybody's treated the same, blind justice, equal justice under the law. People are held accountable for what they do. Anthony Fauci gets convicted of lying to the American people and causing the deaths and the sickness and the destruction of more people than anyone in the in the history of America. And he gets convicted. He either spends the rest of his life in jail, or he's, there's a punishment for what he's done. People have to be held accountable. If you use the Department of Justice to persecute your political enemies, you are put on trial and go to jail for the rest of your life. That has to happen. And if it doesn't happen, they just continue to do the same thing. So you're absolutely right. I mean, I went and testified in a J6 trial for the praying grandma, the Rebecca Lawrence, the one that 72 years old, great grandmother, went in and prayed for 10, walked around the Capitol. She came to Washington D.C. and prayed and fasted for 3 or 4 days before the whole thing. I mean, and she's convicted and ends up 1 year probation, 6 months house arrest, can't leave her house, can't get on the internet, unbelievable. But they wanted a year in jail. That's what the evil Department of Justice was after with this lady. And Brad, I'm telling you, man, I came home grieving from that trial because of what you just described, a justice system that is so taken by the Marxists and the communists, that is so controlled and being used to persecute in our nation. We have people that have sat in solitary confinement for 2 years without a trial in the gulag in Washington, D.C. We have a police officer that has been sentenced to 7 years in prison for bending over and trying to help another police officer get up at the Capitol. And he was charged with assault of a police officer for trying to help someone who's being trampled. The evil that has happened to our justice system grieves me. I get chills right now just thinking about how wrong it is, because you and I know what that means. That means you lose the whole thing. If you do not correct the justice part of this, the whole system will be used as a totalitarian state. And people are going to think this is hyperbole. Listen, you think communism was bad in the last century, killed 100 million people? You let America, the most powerful nation in the history of the world, be controlled outright by the communists without the opportunity for opposition to speak up, for opposition to be jailed, you let that happen, it will be the worst thing the world has ever seen. There will be more destruction and death than you can possibly imagine. It will be biblical purport. It will be unreal. We have to stop that from happening. We have to get back the control of the levers of power into the hands of people, back to William Wilberforce, who make good fashionable. They have to get back to the values that produce a society where goodness, which is things like what you just described, equal justice under the law, that's goodness. We have to bring that back, or the world is going to suffer. I mean, the stakes could not be higher.
Yeah. Well, but here's the deal. So you talked about 14 Republicans voted against illegal aliens voting, and they voted against that. Now, that to me is, I don't want to say insurrection, but there's a term for destroying your nation. I don't know if treason is we've talked about this before. Treason is a very specific charge, and it's very limited to who gets to be charged, as it should be, because it's about as bad as it gets.
Sure.
Treason is as bad as it gets. So you better make sure you have crossed all the X boxes to get treason, and that's fine. That as it should be. But there's other terms. Insurrection, I guess, is one of them, or whatever. But when a Republican whose purpose, just like a Democrat's, is to check and balance if one of the branches gets out of control, when they neglect that obligation and in fact fight against it, all of the principles and the formulas and the machinery that was created so we could fix it when it goes sideways is over. Now, if it doesn't work, there is no boundaries. There's no perimeters anymore by which we can reel in the brokenness. We have lost the republic. So,
well, you said a couple things I want to comment on. It checks and balances, right? So when that happens, our system is designed to have these safety valves, these checks and balances. And it's not just, we're taught in school, the checks and balances are president, Congress, the courts, and then checks and balances between those. No, it's also checks and balances between the feds and the states. The states can check and balance the feds. They haven't done it in a very, very long time. They're not doing their job. In fact, the states have the final say on the check and balance. They control the constitutional amendment process, and that is the ultimate check. That's the ultimate, your trump card, the ultimate, your checkmate is the states using the constitutional amendment process to do that. So if they wimp out and they don't do that, we're done. If the states don't check, because the Fed system is broke, Brad, it's broke. That what you just watched, where these Republicans were unwilling, all Democrats and 14 Republicans unwilling to say, you must be a citizen to vote in our elections, which is the ultimate undermining of the system, right? We're now saying to the world, come control our election system, right? That's how broken the federal system is. And they have their excuses.
How is that not? I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I don't want to just keep talking about what is clearly a violation of what is a constitutional expectation. It just feels like, Rick, help me with this, please, that we're beyond frustration and we're beyond hand wringing. Something has to be done by which there is no option for them to continue to destroy the Constitution and my freedoms. These people have decided to rule me. This is no longer freedom. I'm no longer a republic, which simply means people rule. I'm not ruling this. They're ruling me, which, by the way, I never voted for them to rule me. Just represent me. So when these, so if the republic, so my point is this, I said this to you, I think the last time we had a conversation, and I'm very careful when I say what I'm about to say, because nobody wants a civil war, a real civil war. We've had one, and it's as bad. You can't. Number one, once you start that, there's no going back. There's no oops, sorry, do over. No, this is as bad as it gets. People die. It's anarchy. You don't know if there will be a stable government left over. What will other enemies of our
usually
country?
Leads to usually used to a totalitarian. I mean, we're the exception, right?
Yes. So
in the original.
Of course. No. And if at a minimum, our enemies would use that weakness to try to undermine even more freedoms in us, and take that weakness to, hey, let's get into the southern border. Let's come on in. I mean, this is what's happened. They have let people walk into our border who essentially not only don't understand or respect what it means to be an American, but undermine it, don't care about it, and want to destroy it so they can control it. So.
Let me answer your question. We right back to where we started in this interview. Learn from the people that did it before. In the Declaration, Jefferson told us exactly what to do. So after he lays out the philosophy, talks about the things we all say we're for: truth, pursuit of happiness, life, liberty, blah, 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 right? that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men deriving their just powers from the consent of the government. So we set the system up. That's why we have government. And then he says that when any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it. So now, Brad, I am not saying abolish our entire government. I'm saying abolish those pieces of government that we never gave them permission to do, or that are undermining, that are actually preventing truth, preventing pursuit of happiness, preventing the ability to give or refuse consent. So they're screwing up the voting system, whatever. Abolish the Department of Education. Abolish all of these entities.
But how can you
that are
abolish
now
them
governing?
when they're in complete control? But they're
no,
totally...
I'll get there. I'll get there. And then, so abolish certain parts and then alter other parts. So alter the government back to the constitutional republic. We have the tools in the Constitution to do it. We're building the critical mass to get there. You have to literally, through the system, through the peaceable constitutional process, you have to say, you guys are wrong, and we're muscular. We're going to do the most muscular thing under the Constitution. We're going to pass a constitutional amendment to abolish you. We're going to get rid of your department and say, you do not govern us anymore. We're 19 states in. We need 15 states more to join the movement.
Are you talking about a convention?
We're going to check a convention of states. An Article 5 convention. Article 5 tells us how to do this. We've never done it. It's the hardest thing to do under the Constitution. We're getting there. The movement's growing, 5 million strong now that are saying, let's do this. We 19 states that have called on this to happen. We need 15 states more to do it. It's going to take a few more years probably to get there. And that's why I do think if Donald Trump wins, it's a reprieve to keep them from getting all the way to total totalitarian power, right? But it's not just a reprieve. That's all it is. It stops that. Hopefully he wipes out the DOJ and the FBI and starts over and cleans house on all those things. But these are the things that have to happen in order to save the republic. I think we've got less than 5 years. Now, our mutual friend Eric Metaxas thinks we have less than a year, right? He's the student of 1930s Germany. He thinks we're in that moment that Dietrich Bonhoeffer said we have less than 2 years. And then it was too late once the church did not stand up. So I think it's less than 5 years, but I see the momentum, and I'm trying to figure out, are we going to get there in time to stop it? Lord willing, I hope that we do. But Brad, this is absolutely go time. This is second, 2-minute warning. This is where people have to get involved and not just go to a rally and wave a sign. You have to go back home and say, I'm going to turn out 10 more people to vote. I'm going to be on the school board or on the city council or whatever. I'm going to take this fiefdom back from these leftists in my community. There's so many ways people can get involved, and there's so many groups that are doing good work in the field and winning. They're having victories. So find a local group, whether it's a Turning Point faith group or it's a Moms for Liberty or Moms for America or Family Research Council's Culture Impact Team or do a Patriot Academy Constitution class, or just do not sit on the sidelines. Don't listen to Brad and me talk about these things and cheer other people on. You be one of the people that gets cheered on. You be one of the action-oriented people, because the ground that's being tilled right now and the seeds that are being planted right now are what will produce the fruit over the next 5 years to save the country. But this is no time to just listen to podcasts and get heated in your car. You have to actually join and lock shields with people. Yeah. Because, Brad, I mean, the critical state, who knows that they're not going to have a 20-city attack? I mean, I think that kind of stuff that's what happens in history. And we've led them across the border. So what happens if you have a catastrophic event 2 weeks from now where they try to, stop the voting or whatever it might be, or they just want to cause chaos and make people want to stay home? Who do you know right now in your church, in your family, in your neighborhood that you can call and say, hey, we better be in contact. We better be, making sure that we've got enough groceries to weather this storm if the grid goes down? That's not conspiracy stuff, man. That's real life stuff that happens in history and happens in other nations right now. And we're primed for it right now in America. So I'm not saying that to scare people. I'm saying be prepared. Don't be foolish. Start knowing truth, saturating truth, start building community so you have others you can team up with, and then start picking out those weeds and tending the garden, planting the good stuff. Man, I don't know what else to say, but get in the fight.
Let me say this then, because obviously powerful message there and evaluation of the lay of the land. Well, so one thing I learned, and when you and I first started doing our stuff together and became friends and, like-minded men in fighting this fight, I will say that I learned about myself that I did have that that potential problem that I did engage in, which is to somehow elevate my patriotism and my love for my nation almost to my into the level of my faith, like it was a balance of my faith,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it's not.
Yeah.
The more
Right.
I
Right.
see the world,
Absolutely.
and the more that I see the demonic forces, and again, if you're watching this from all over the world or whatever, and you're not a believer in God or whatever, then this will sound foolish to you, and I don't care. You're wrong. There is a spiritual force, and that's why we're seeing Russell Brand getting supposedly,
Oh,
even we're
beautiful.
watching Jordan Peterson, who's not a believer, say the Bible's the most important book. And there's some reason why people are who
Right.
are not necessarily
Right.
religious or antagonistic are suddenly saying there's something bigger here, and you better tap into this bigger
That's
guy
right.
because it ain't about
That's
government.
right.
They're all corrupt. Okay, so
That's
that being
right.
said, I realized that it's God Almighty and it's Jesus Christ, because he was the only time in history that God said, dimensionalized himself, said, I am in fact God. A lot of guys have said that. He was predicted, so that shows that he was not part of linear time. He was part of a genealogy of people, the Jews, who maintain meticulous records to show that this is really us. He came in and fulfilled prophecies to prove that it's miraculous. He did miraculous things that people saw to prove it's not a cult. I really have access to and control nature. Died and rose again to prove that obviously the ultimate ending of that all humans fear is death. And he said, no, I beat that too. So there's never been a religion like it. There's never been a human like it. It's why Christianity is true. And if you are Jewish, it is simply the fulfillment of your Messiah. Jump in. It was given to you first, but it is Christ followers are the last truth tellers on earth. You have to pray, believe, fast, ask God to come back and help us, to give us a window, to give us a third great awakening. Why not believe for it? Maybe we're at punishment time. He said, nah, unfortunately, 40 years in the desert, you guys have already cried. I don't know, but I'm going to go down swinging. I'll tell you that. I'm going to go down believing God will show me some mercy in the meantime. So God first. Okay. Secondly, then, proactivity in the government based on the United States, which based on Judeo-Christian ethics stated that we would honor God. And I think he blessed us for that. So, you join or find a biblical citizenship course that will give you some weapons to understand how to associate and
Right.
connect your faith, which is crucial and the foundation of everything, with your citizenship as an American, as to how the
Yeah. And your
government.
freedom here in this country and how that works. Yeah.
Okay, two, you can become a Constitution coach, so you know your rights, so you'll easily be able to
Right.
discern when they're being breached. And
Right.
then lastly,
And don't be intimidated by that. You don't have to know anything. You're a Constitution host. You just bring people in your living room, hit play, and we'll do the teaching for you.
They
We need
will
to pick a
learn.
Brad Stine week. We need to have a Brad Stine week and
Well,
have everybody come join us.
okay. Well, that you just lost 500 members right there, but no, I mean, so that's another thing you can do is send your kids there. But the
Yeah,
point is that we're at a tipping point, so we don't have a lot of time to
that's right.
leisurely
You got to
move
plug in
into this.
now.
But
Absolutely.
so lastly, I would say this: 19 states need to join the Convention of States for us to actually
15 more. We've got 19. We need 15 more. Yep.
Okay. So who are the 15 most hopeful candidates, and how can
Yeah.
people watching this, if it's Utah, or if it's, I don't even know who's out there, if it's North Carolina, whoever hasn't joined, but you think they're a good candidate, how can people who live in that state start saying, you know what, you guys are going to vote and you're jumping in? It sounds to me like this is our final raft. This is our
Yes.
Titanic. This is the raft. So why don't we make
In
this?
fact, the book I'm working on is called The Final Option. It's exactly, and this is the final option. It's got to get done. If you go to conventionofstates.com, there's a map right there on the homepage. North Carolina is the next most likely. They passed in one chamber. We got to get it out of the I think the Senate. I think the House, maybe the Senate. Anyway, one of the chambers passed. We got to get the other one. Kansas has actually passed it. We've got a challenge right now because they have a 2/3 thing that's unconstitutional in their state. But so there's 2 right there that we're most likely to get very quickly. So that'll get us to 21. So then we still need 13 more. And there are Ohio, Pennsylvania, Illinois, Minnesota, some others where there's active legislation right now. Best thing to do is go to conventionstates.com, look at that map, and plug into your group in your state, even if your state's already passed it. They're really good. They've got a large grassroots organization, so they're really good at staying involved even after they pass the resolution, so that you can stay on top of what's going on in your community and in your state. So highly recommend folks go there today and learn more.
Okay, and just quickly, for those who are listening to this and maybe have heard some sort of antagonistic perspectives of the Convention of States, I don't know what the opposition's talking points are, but but
no,
what is
we could spend all day on it, but yeah, and there's some good videos that I did that with Mark Meckler that are on that website. We call it, there's an app for that, and it's just a bunch of 2-minute answers to most of the objections. But just generally speaking, I will say this: most people are afraid of what they call a runaway convention, that the convention would do something crazy and get rid of the entire Constitution. That's why the founders, again, back to their genius, designed it as a 3-step process. Number 1, 34 states have to call for it. Number 2, at the convention, you've got to have a majority of states vote for a proposal, a suggestion, so it doesn't go into the Constitution. And then it goes back to all 50 states, and 38 of them have to ratify. So the safety valve is incredibly high, and impossible that there would be a quote runaway convention. A lot of reasons I could explain why, but it's very, very important to at least give states the chance to come together and make the suggestions and say, and basically, and we've done this, it's just crazy that we haven't done it in so long. Get the states together and say, the feds are broken. How can we put them back in their box and trim their sails? It's not that we want to get rid of the federal government. I'm not for secession. I think we need all 50 states to stay together to be able to take on China and all the other world threats that we have, to have good commerce. I mean, basically, that's why we're together, Brad. We have a constitution for war, for commerce, and for travel. That's why we're together. Other than that, let California be weird. Let every state have its own personality. And that's called federalism, and that's what we have to restore. But there's a lot, and we've got some. I really encourage people to go to that website and watch some of those videos, or take one of our classes. We dive a little further into this, and we listen to. I'm willing to talk to answer any objection people have on that one, but that one's got to happen, or we won't save the republic.
You're saying that even if you are a state that didn't join the Convention of States,
if you didn't call for it, you still participate in it, or you're foolish if you're not there. They'll all be there, believe me.
But they would still be asked to vote on a potential amendment, even if they weren't people who participated initially in the gathering of the states.
Yeah. 34 is the number to ask. Then you need a majority once they're there to propose it, and then every state gets a chance to vote yes or no, up or down, ratify or don't ratify that amendment.
And what would be the
and overruling the federal government's not new. We did that with the 11th Amendment. The Supreme Court had a bad decision called Chisholm v. Georgia. Within 4 months, we had a constitutional amendment telling them no and overruling it. We should do that all the time. States should be letting their voice be known all the time.
What would be? What do you think? I mean, I don't know if you're on a hard out right now.
I do. I've got another interview I'm 10 minutes late for, but for you, Brad, I'm willing to be late.
Okay. Well, no. Well, and I'm not trying to. I mean, it's so important what we're talking about, and I don't.
We need to do another show just on this, honestly, because this is such a critical piece to actually restructuring the thing and saving the country.
What I was going to ask was, what do you think would be the most crucial amendments that would be necessary to right the ship? So maybe we should just do another one.
Term limits, balanced budget. The ability to overrule the Supreme Court when it gives a bad decision, or overrule, 3/5 of the states being able to do that. There's several. Mark Levin has a whole book on this called Liberty Amendments, and he's got actually 17 amendments in there that are suggestions for overruling specific things that the feds have done. So I recommend that for reading. But yeah, man, let's do another show and specifically go through this, because it is critical, man, and people need to learn about it.
Well, listen, I'm going to ask you one more question for my subscribers. It only goes to those who are part of the Militia of the Mind and the Mighty 10,000. Give me something, as you've gone to all the states, as you are so great at this, and have been such an inspiration to so many people. I see your star rising as far as the type of panels they're putting you on. I'm so grateful, because you deserve it. what is the most optimistic thing you have seen that makes you think, you know what, maybe, just maybe, a miracle's right around the corner and America is, in fact, has a shot to be rescued? What would you say that would be? Hey guys, I'm interrupting my own interview. If you want the answer that you haven't heard yet, go to bradstine.com and join one of the 3 tiers. It is the militia of the mind, it is the warrior level, or it is the special forces. And then you'll get all kinds of special content and bonus answers to make you smarter than you could ever imagine. Go there now, jump on and join the Mighty 10,000. Well, Rick Green is America's Constitution coach. You need to go to patriotacademy.com and you can get any kind of curriculums. I think for homeschooling stuff, there's stuff for biblical citizenship, which can be taught and should be taught in your church, biblical citizenship. So yes, it's very much about the Bible and spiritual realm. But if you are someone who believes that you shouldn't be involved in politics, you're a fool. You're a buffoon. We don't have time for that. I'm not talking about getting into your pulpits and starting deciding, which political party, this, that. No. We're talking about how to be a good citizen and how to be a good ethical, moral person as a Christian into the atmosphere that you exist. Because most of the time in your life isn't the hour and a half maybe that you go to church once a week. It's at your business, it's in your home, it's with your neighbor. That's where most of your time is. So that's where you need to be a warrior, not to be amongst a bunch of Christians that believe like you. That we don't need that guy. We need the guy that's willing to go out and pay the price and stand alone if necessary, because then at least you can stand one day in front of God, which you will, and hear him say, well done, Amen, my good and faithful servant. Remember, folks, if they ever say to you, dude, you're not being politically correct, always say thank you for the compliment and hang on to that as best you can. The Frankfurt School, in many ways, started this, and let's send them back to hell where they belong. Folks, I'm just a comedian, but I am a follower of Jesus Christ, which puts me on a very special family that you can join. And I care about freedom. I care about my friends like Rick Green, and I care about going down swinging. I never thought this could be real. It's all sounded like words and books and reading about all the founders and about the martyrs. I love reading about people that did things. I didn't want to turn, but God said, oh, no. This is real, and it's your turn, and I'm going down swinging, as should you, especially as a follower of Christ. And remember, folks, when you watch Brad Stine Has Issues, I'm just doing what I'm supposed to do, which is what? Putting the woke back to sleep. I will see you next Monday.